These principles of forgiveness are not just theory to me. I learned these principles out of a very real need in my own life to learn how to forgive. And I'd like to tell you the story of how I learned these principles. Back in the early 1990s, I was asked to be the director of a child evangelism fellowship, Camp Good News. And part of the job with this, being the director of the camp, was making the room assignments for all the little kids as they registered for camp. These were kids, grade school age kids 8 years old through 12 years old. And as the applications for the camp came in, I made their bedding assignments. Well, with the boys, we had 3 rooms. And so 3 rooms with a lot of bunks in them and whatever. So I tried to the best of my ability to, put the kids of similar ages in the same rooms, because there's a big difference between some 12-year-old boys are almost adults and some 8-year-old boys are still little kids. So I just wanted to try and match the kids up where they'd be in the appropriate rooms. And that middle group, I kind of had the 8-year-olds and some 9-year-olds in one group, and then like the 10-year-olds and maybe some 11-year-olds, and then the older kids, the 11 and 12-year-olds in the third room. Well, that middle room filled up very quickly, and there were no more beds in it. And then I got a late application, and I didn't know much about this kid. I mean, I didn't know anything about him other than what was on the registration. Didn't know the boy. He was 10 years old. So he would have gone in that middle room, but all the bed assignments were already filled up in that middle room, so I had to put him in either the older kid's room or the younger kid's room. Tough choice. I figure he's 10, what if he's like an immature 10, I put him in with the 12-year-olds and something happens, and so I decided to put him in the room with the younger kids. Well, the first day of camp, I'm going over the ground rules with all the kids. Very first thing, very beginning of camp, we're all in the big room, and I'm telling them all the rules of the camp and the guidelines and all this stuff. And this boy, this 10-year-old boy, Carlton, isn't there yet. And about halfway through this orientation, Carlton shows up. I take one look at him, and I know I've made a mistake. This 10-year-old black boy is, well, he's pretty nearly as big as I am, and he's really angry. I mean, you could see how angry this young man was. But all the beds were filled up now, and it would be a huge issue to try and scramble around, and once the kids are already kind of in their rooms and in their places. So I just got the counselors together and I said, look, we have to pray. I mean, this could be a bad situation. This young man, this boy is angry, and he's so big, and he's with these little kids, and we have to pray. And we did. We prayed, the counselors, and we prayed. In the very first chapel, just like an hour later, Carlton gave his heart to Jesus, and this amazing transformation happened. I mean, the rest of that week was just such a joy. And he was just the sweetest, kindest boy. It was wonderful. And at the end of the week, one of the things we always had was around a campfire, kind of like an open mic kind of thing. There's no microphone, but the kids could one by one stand up in front of the others and talk about what was the most important part of camp to them, or what they liked about the camp. Carlton got up, 10-year-old boy. He got up and he said, when I was 4 years old, my father was murdered. And I've spent my entire life since then just waiting till I'm old enough to kill the man who killed my father. And here's the anger, right? But he said, now that I know Jesus, I'm just praying that that man finds Jesus too. I mean, this was an amazing transformation. Now, Carlton, I have a son who's the same age as Carlton, and Carlton and my son became best friends after camp, or during camp and afterwards, and Carlton lived in the same little town we did. Single mom, of course, and no father. And Carlton started coming to church with us and started hanging out at our house. He became kind of like part of the family. And in fact, Carlton's mother, she worked in the orange groves and very, very hard work, and she worked, I mean, long hours and very hard. And because they were poor, she could not afford to take time off of work for anything. And so over the course of the next few years, Carlton's mother kind of signed some legal papers that I could represent Carlton, like at school functions, at different, things like that. If he got in trouble, I could go in and talk to the teachers. And so I'm just saying that Carlton was more than just, a kid I met at camp. He wasn't like really a foster child, but he certainly became a part of our hearts and part of our lives and part of our family in that bigger sense. And he spent an enormous amount of time with us. And I want to jump ahead now 5 years. Carlton and my son, close friends. Carlton's a part of our family in that bigger sense. And I'm working at a church, a large church, as a director of Christian Ed. And Carlton comes to the church, and he's growing in grace and knowledge, becoming a fine young man. He's 15 years old now. And one day about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Carlton showed up at my office at the church. And he was supposed to be in school, so I knew something was up. And so I asked him, Carlton, what's going on? Why aren't you at school? And he said, Steve, I got in trouble at school today. There's something I didn't even do, but I'm in trouble for it. He said there was this fight, and they're accusing me of being in it, and I wasn't even in it. Well, I had some errands I had to run, some things I had to do, getting ready for a children's program that afternoon. So I told Carlton, you know what, you just sit here in my office. I'm going to go do what I have to do. I'll be back in an hour, and you can help me out with the program this afternoon, and then tomorrow morning we'll go down to the school and get it all straightened out. Well, while I was out and about on my errands, the sheriff showed up at my office at the church, put Carlton in handcuffs, and led him away. And they charged him, because of his size, even though he was only 15 years old, they charged him as an adult with aggravated battery. And here's what happened. There was this fight at school, and a black young man got in a fight with a white young man in rural Florida. This is a big deal. A lot of racial issues still there. All the kids at school saw the fight, but nobody wanted to say they saw the fight. The principal came on the loudspeaker system, and he begged anybody who saw this fight, you have to come to the office and tell us what actually happened. And Carlton, because he was a Christian young man, felt convicted because he had seen what happened, and so he went to the office. When he's at the office, the young man who was actually in the fight was there waiting to talk to the principal himself. And this young man turned to Carlton and he said, I want you to tell the principal that the other guy started the fight. And Carlton looked at him and said very honestly, well, I wasn't there at the start of the fight. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to lie. I can only tell what I saw. And this young man said, if you don't tell the principal what I want you to tell him, I'm going to tell the principal that you helped me. That I'm the one that had the issue, but you were like a hitman. I paid you, and you helped me beat the other kid up. And that's what happened. He told the principal that Carlton had helped. The sheriff came, and they looked at the two guys, these two boys, and Carlton, because he's a big, strong boy. They said, this one will make a better example than that one. Let's arrest this one. And they had the other boy turn state's evidence, and he got off, slap on the wrist. And ultimately Carlton was convicted by an all-white jury, sentenced as an adult. There were no weapons, there was no permanent damage. It was a fight at high school, but a new zero-tolerance policy, and end result was Carlton was sentenced to a maximum security prison here in Florida for 4 years, $100,000 of restitution when he got out. for a crime he never committed. Now, all during this trial, we prayed. I mean, being a pastor and having been in missions and a family, a mission-minded family, and ministry-minded family, I have Christian friends literally all over the world. People were praying. People were praying that justice would be done, and yet Carlton was convicted of a crime he did not commit and sentenced as a 15-year-old boy to an adult maximum security institution. And it was so unfair. And after the trial, as soon as the trial was over, during the trial, Sarah, my wife, and I, we had paid, taken out a loan, paid a lawyer. So we're in debt. We're in debt for this. We don't have much money. And Sarah, who was a public school teacher, got fired by the school board because we paid. I mean, they didn't say that's why, but that was why. And then the church I was working for, during the course of the trial, they were so supportive, but as soon as Carlton was convicted, we were no longer good public relations, and I was fired. So now we're in this small rural town in Florida with no jobs. Carlton's in prison, and these same kids that lied about Carlton at the trial began trying to kill my son. And we had to take my son out of school for his own protection and keep him at home to finish that year. And our lives just went in a matter of a couple months from very good and stable and happy to fearful and angry and broken. And we made the decision that we just needed to move out of that area and make a new start. And I had the opportunity to move here to Jupiter, Florida, and pastor a church. We moved here, a small church, and they don't really know all this background. They know a little bit of it, but they don't know the whole story. And the fact is, the days go on, and I'm pastoring this church, and I love God, and I'm loving the people in my church, and I'm really trying to be the best pastor I can be. But I'm sitting in my office, and these events keep playing back in my mind. And the unfairness of this just keeps going back over and over and over in my mind, and I can't let it go. And the more I think about it, the worse it gets. And I find myself, even though I have the Bible open and I'm trying to study and I'm trying to prepare a sermon and I'm trying to be a pastor, I find my mind racing with revenge fantasies. Thinking about how I could go back over to that little town in Central Florida and I could kill the prosecutor and I could kill the judge. And I could be back over on the coast here within a couple of hours and they would never know who did it. Now, I know that's wrong thinking. I mean, I know, I'm a pastor. I love God. I know this is not good, but I can't let it go. And those revenge fantasies, as they begin to take shape, it turns almost more to plotting than fantasizing. I'm a preacher and I'm thinking of murder. And I'm planning how I could do it and get away with it. And I can't let it go. It won't go away. And I'm praying about it. I'm trying to do what's right. And I can't let it go. I'm so angry. I'm so angry. And at some point I realized it just can't go on. I mean, I cannot remain a pastor plotting murder. This just can't go on. And so one day I just flipped this little switch in my mind, in my heart. Some of you know what I'm talking about. I just turned off the anger. I mean, I just flipped off my emotions. And you see, that on the surface that sounds, well, that's a good thing. Now I wasn't angry. True, I wasn't angry. In fact, at this point I was incapable of being angry. But not only was I not angry, I really felt very little of anything. I really felt more an emotional numbness. And I want to tell you that numbness and peace are not the same thing. You see, flipping that switch in my mind and choosing to shut down my emotions, that is not God's healing. That is not healing. That was me doing what I thought was best just to survive because I didn't know what to do. And over the next few years, I enjoyed being a pastor. I enjoyed preaching and teaching. I love God. I love the people in my church. But I can't get angry. I mean, it's just not there. And you know, in churches, there are times when the pastor needs to be a little bit angry. There are wolves that sneak into the church and cause damage. There are people that are manipulative, and they need to be confronted in love in Christ, but they need to be confronted. Well, I couldn't do that because I didn't feel anything. And you know, with my children, there are times when fathers need to be angry with their kids. I couldn't. I didn't feel anything. This wasn't good. Some of my Christian friends actually looked at me and interpreted this lack of anger as a spiritual gifting, and I just let them think whatever they wanted to think. But I knew in my heart, this isn't from God. This isn't even good, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm numb. What they're interpreting as patience and self-control is really just numbness. It's not good. And then one day, a friend came into my church who did some inner healing kind of ministry, and after he got to know me a little bit, he noticed. He said, you know, there's something not right here, Steve. You don't get angry. Even when you're supposed to get angry, even when it's the right thing to do to be angry, you don't get angry. That's not right. Would you mind meeting with me, and let's just kind of dig into that and see what God might do. Well, I agreed to that because, you know, I don't like where I am. I mean, I don't like what's going on in my life at this point. I just don't know what to do with it. So I met with this friend, and I told him the whole story. I told him how I had flipped that switch, shut down my emotions by choice. And he asked me, would you be willing to renounce that and flip that switch again and let your emotions come up? I said, no. I just absolutely not. I will not. I won't do that, because if I do that, I very well may go over to that town and commit murder. I can't afford to do that. My friend asked, would you mind if we just ask God about that? And he prayed and he said, God, is it true that if Steve allows himself to feel anger and other natural emotions as you created them, if he allows those emotions to come up, is it true that he would go over to that town and kill people? And almost instantly, deep in my heart, I heard God answer. God told me, Steve, you could choose to forgive. I'd never really considered that. But prayerfully, I made the choice to allow God to restore my emotions, allow God to speak truth to the pain I was feeling, and I chose to forgive. And my friend taught me these forgiveness principles that we need to take into account. And as I looked at that, the account was great. My dear friend Carlton spent 4 brutal years in an adult institution. He's never fully recovered from that. My son's life was threatened. This was hard on our family. I lost my job. My wife lost her job. Because of the circumstances and how that played out, I was not the pastor that I could have been. People in my church did not receive from me what maybe they could have received. This was a big debt. But as I took a full account of the debt and I released that debt to Jesus, and I told him, Lord Jesus, I do not want to carry this anger. I do not want to carry this bitterness. I am choosing to forgive. I'm choosing to release this debt to you. Lord, you take it from me and you carry it. And you know what Jesus did? He lifted that debt. He lifted the debt. And I forgave. In forgiving, it doesn't mean that what had happened was okay. It's not okay. What happened was evil. What happened was wrong. But you see, they're not on my hook anymore. Now they're on God's hook. One day they will stand before God and give an account. This is now between them and God. It's not between myself and them. And in fact, as I forgave, God gave me a measure of compassion for those people, for their racism, for their bigotry, for their arrogance. How hurting and desperate they must be. And I truly pray that one day they too will find Jesus, will know the loving Savior that I know, and find the peace and the joy. Yes, joy. When I chose to feel anger, you know what else came back? All of those emotions. When I chose to forgive, the emotions, I felt peace and joy. My life since then has been a journey of learning to forgive more, a lifestyle of forgiveness. And out of that lifestyle of forgiveness has sprung an intimacy with God that I had never experienced before. And I know that this can be done, no matter what the hurts, no matter what has gone on in your life, no matter how bad it is. If you remember, this is not about letting somebody off the hook like it doesn't matter. This is about releasing it to Jesus and letting Jesus handle it. Letting Jesus carry that bitterness that you were never designed to carry anyway. Letting him deal with the anger. Letting him deal with the retribution and the revenge. Not our job. We weren't equipped to deal with that. Give it to Jesus. Let him deal with it. And you can be free.